Some conversations are too loud to be heard, and sometimes the silence says more than words ever could. The world is watching, not because something magical happened, but because two of the biggest democracies in the world are no longer talking. The United States has said, we won't discuss it with India. Not a compromise, not a solution, not even a conversation. And you know what hurts more than disagreement? Dismissal. Because when someone refuses to talk, it's no longer about the issue, it's about the relationship. Some conversations are not broken because of what was said, but because of what was never said. Silence can be loud. And sometimes it is in the silence that we feel the weight of what's missing. When two people stop talking, it's not just words that disappear, it's trust, it's connection, it's the possibility of healing. And the same thing happens on the global stage when two countries, two powers, stop engaging. Right now, the world is witnessing something more than just a disagreement over numbers or policies. This is not just about a steel tariff. This is about something deeper, something more personal, a refusal to talk, a closed door, a lost opportunity to understand. India and the United States, two of the largest democracies in the world, have always stood as examples of resilience, growth, and diplomacy. They have shared technology, culture, dreams, and development. But today, we see a different chapter being written, one where pride speaks louder than peace, where ego stands taller than empathy, because when one side says, we won't discuss, what they're really saying is, you don't matter enough for me to explain, and isn't that what breaks people? That feeling of being dismissed, overlooked, ignored, it's not the rejection that wounds the most, it's the unwillingness to even talk. This is not just about governments. This is about humanity, about people whose lives depend on decisions made in high-rise boardrooms and across diplomatic tables. People who have no voice in the debate, but will carry the weight of its consequences. Workers in factories, families depending on exports, small business owners praying the markets stay open. These are the people who suffer the cost of silence. When the U.S. says we won't discuss the steel tariffs with India, it sends more than a policy message. It sends an emotional one. It says we choose protection over partnership, control over cooperation, and that changes everything. Because trade isn't just numbers on a page, it's trust between nations, it's the heartbeat of economies, it's the bridge between cultures. India has risen through storms. It has built itself from the ground up, not by asking for shortcuts, but by demanding fairness. Dignity, a place at the table, not out of pity, but out of principle, and that's all it's asking for now, a conversation, a space to speak, a moment to be heard. But the world today seems to value power more than partnership, loudness more than listening, and in that kind of world, silence becomes a weapon. But here's the thing, silence never solves, it postpones, it builds walls, it creates distance, and soon the issue is no longer the issue. The pain becomes personal, the absence of dialogue becomes the dialogue itself. Imagine someone you once trusted refusing to talk to you, not because you betrayed them, not because you failed them, but simply because they've decided you're not worth the conversation. That's the sting India is feeling right now, not because it can't survive without the U.S., but because relationships built on respect should never end in indifference, and yet that's what's unfolding. Two nations with shared values, divided not by war but by pride, divided not by difference, but by the unwillingness to see eye to eye. But here's the hope. Conversations can begin again. Broken things can be rebuilt. It takes humility, it takes courage, and above all, it takes the decision to care, because at the end of the day, leadership is not measured by how loudly you say no. It's measured by how bravely you choose to say, let's try again. The world doesn't need more walls. It needs windows. It needs people and leaders who choose the harder path, the one where listening matters, where collaboration wins, where no one walks away from the table just because the conversation got uncomfortable. A broken conversation isn't the end, it's an invitation to mend, to rebuild, to reconnect. And if these two giants remember the power of a single honest exchange, they might just remind the world what true diplomacy looks like. Because in the end, the most powerful words are the ones spoken when it's easier to stay silent. Sometimes we hold on too tightly to pride, and in doing so, we let go of the very things that could have healed us. In life, in love, and even in global trade, pride has a cost, and too often, that cost is paid not by the powerful, but by the people quietly depending on them to do the right thing. This world was not built by pride. It was built by partnership, by people who chose progress over personal interest. Nations grew not because they always won, but because they knew when to listen, when to bend, and when to build something greater than themselves. But today, we are watching pride play out on a world stage, a stand-off between India and the United States over something as strategic and symbolic as steel tariffs. On paper, it's just policy, numbers, trade balances, export rules, but beneath all that is something far more human: ego, power, control. And when ego enters the room, humility quietly walks out, because when a country says, "We won't talk about this," what they're really saying is, "Our pride matters more than this partnership." And that's dangerous, because trade isn't just an exchange of goods. It's an exchange of trust. When two nations agree to share, sell, and buy from each other, they're not just moving products across borders. They're building bridges. They're saying, "I see you, I respect you, I believe this deal can help us both grow." But when one nation shuts the door, that bridge begins to crack, and the cracks don't just appear in policy, they appear in people's lives. Factories slow down, jobs are lost, investments dry up, hope becomes harder to hold on to, and what for? To protect pride. Sometimes we confuse standing firm with being unmovable. But strength isn't always about refusing to change. Real strength is found in knowing when to stand tall, and when to lean in and listen. Real strength is knowing that fairness doesn't weaken you. It makes you worthy of respect. India isn't begging, it's asking to be heard. It's saying, "We've built ourselves from the ground up, we've earned our seat at the table, and all we're asking for is balance." Because global trade cannot be one-sided. That's not trade, that's control. And yet, the conversation has become one-sided, or worse, non-existent, because pride has closed the door, and when that happens, dignity walks out with it. But what's ironic is this: even the most powerful nations are not immune to the ripple effects of their pride. When you alienate an ally, you isolate yourself too. When you hurt a partner, you damage your own possibilities. Pride may protect you in the moment, but it can cost you years of growth, decades of trust, and generations of opportunity. And this isn't just about India and the U.S., it's about a message to the world that in global trade, fairness should not be conditional, that power should not dictate what's right, and that collaboration, real, honest collaboration, only happens when both sides are willing to speak and listen. Because what is global leadership if it's rooted in pride, not purpose? What kind of progress are we chasing if we leave others behind to protect our position? The cost of pride is real, and it's heavy. But here's the good news: it's never too late to choose differently. It takes one moment, one decision, one step toward humility, to change the story, to say, "We may not agree, but we can still discuss," to say, "We are strong enough to listen," to say, "We value partnership more than proving a point," because no economy, no matter how big, can thrive in isolation, and no nation becomes truly great by standing alone. Greatness comes from knowing when to fight, and when to forgive, when to stand tall, and when to sit down and talk. So maybe, just maybe, the future of global trade doesn't belong to the proudest. Maybe it belongs to the wisest, the ones who know that pride builds walls, but humility builds bridges. And in a world that's already divided by so much, we need fewer walls and more bridges. We need more conversations, more compassion, more courage to say, "Let's find a way forward, together," because that's not weakness. That's wisdom, and that's the kind of leadership the world is waiting for. There's something beautiful about rising without asking for applause, about building without demanding validation. That's the story of India. A country that has learned to grow through its own grit, to lead with quiet strength, and to carry both pride and pressure on its shoulders every single day. India is not just a country, it's a spirit. A movement, a heartbeat that has never stopped, even in the face of setbacks, storms, or silence from the world around it. And right now, as it stands in the middle of a trade tension with one of the most powerful nations in the world, it is not standing in weakness. It is standing in clarity, because when you know who you are, you don't need to shout, you don't need to beg, you don't even need to threaten, you just show up with the truth, and that's what India is doing. It's not asking for handouts, it's asking for fairness, it's not demanding special treatment, it's standing up for equal ground. For decades, India has been viewed through the lens of what it lacked. Developing, struggling, chasing, but not anymore, not today. Today, India is a force. It's one of the fastest growing economies in the world. It's driving innovation, building infrastructure, transforming education, and creating jobs, not just for its own people, but contributing to global industries and markets in ways that cannot be ignored. And yet, with every step forward, there are challenges, because growth is never a smooth road, especially when the ones you expect to walk beside you suddenly decide to stop, especially when the tables you helped build now seem to have no seat for you. That's the tension. India is strong, but it's still navigating a world that sometimes refuses to let go of old power dynamics. A world where decisions are still made behind closed doors, and influence often speaks louder than inclusion. The current trade standoff with the U.S. over steel tariffs is just one example, but it reveals so much more. It shows the delicate line between pride and partnership, between standing firm and staying fair. And while some might see India's refusal to stay silent as defiance, it's not. It's dignity. There is power in asking questions, in saying, "Why are we being treated this way?" There's nothing disrespectful in wanting accountability. In fact, that's what real relationships are built on: mutual respect and open dialogue. India's challenge isn't just economic, it's emotional. Because when you give so much, invest so deeply in partnerships, and still find yourself being dismissed, it hurts. It forces you to remember your worth even when the world forgets it. But that's the beauty of India's strength. It doesn't break easily, it bends, it reflects, and then it rises again. Wiser, bolder, clearer than before. The world is changing, and India is not just adapting to that change, it's helping shape it. Whether it's in technology, climate solutions, pharmaceuticals, digital innovation, or defense, India is no longer in the shadows. It's in the room, and it deserves to be heard. Still, this moment is a test of patience, of principle, of how to stay true to your values, even when it's tempting to react out of frustration. Because real power isn't proven in retaliation, it's revealed in how you handle resistance. India has every reason to be assertive, but it also has every reason to stay grounded, because while trade negotiations come and go, the legacy a nation builds through its choices, that lasts. This is not just about steel tariffs. It's about identity, about respect, about showing the world that success doesn't need validation from those who don't see your value. It comes from knowing your value and choosing to stand in it, with or without applause. And if the world is watching, which it is, it will see something profound in India's posture, not arrogance, not aggression, but assurance, a quiet, confident reminder that partnerships only work when both sides are willing to listen. And that silence, when used as a tactic, can only hold power for so long, because eventually truth rises, dignity speaks, and true strength, is always seen in how you carry yourself, not in how loudly you demand to be seen. India knows who it is, and in moments like these the world will too. Sometimes what happens in big rooms, with big names and big decisions, finds its way into the smallest corners of life, into the homes of families who have never held a government title, into the hands of workers who have never stood behind a podium, into the lives of people who never asked to be part of the politics, but somehow always end up paying the price. That's the reality of global tension. It may start in embassies, in press briefings, and behind closed diplomatic doors, but it never stays there. It trickles down quietly, steadily, until the impact is felt by people who never even knew what a tariff meant. Only that something changed. A job didn't come through, a business order got cancelled, a price at the store went higher, and no one explained why. It's easy to look at international issues and think they belong to someone else. That trade wars and global alliances and economic sanctions are just news for the headlines, something to scroll past, something that doesn't touch us directly. But if you listen closely, you'll hear the echo of those decisions in the everyday noise of life. You'll feel it in the slowing heartbeat of a factory, in the uncertainty of a parent who depends on that paycheck, in the quiet fear of a student wondering if there will be enough money left to pay for school next month. This is the part we don't talk about enough, the human side of politics, the local cost of global pride. Right now, the tension between India and the United States over steel tariffs may look like a disagreement over trade, over numbers and percentages and diplomatic positions, but behind those numbers are names, faces, people with dreams, people with responsibilities, and when the tension escalates, the first to feel it aren't always the ones in suits and ties. They're the ones in uniforms. In overalls, in school uniforms, in homes trying to make ends meet. Trade isn't just about what countries buy and sell, it's about what people lose when the deal falls through. Because when exports slow down, small manufacturers feel it first. When relationships sour, investors hold back, and when the conversation stops, so does progress, not for the powerful, but for the people trying to make something of their lives through honest work and hopeful plans. Imagine a father running a steel cutting shop who just got news that a major order was pulled because of international trade policies he had no control over. Imagine the mother who was planning to expand her local business but is now holding back because she doesn't know where the economy is headed. These aren't just hypotheticals. These are real stories, real situations, happening silently while the headlines talk about policy. And that's what makes this so heartbreaking, because sometimes the ones making the decisions are the furthest from the consequences. The tension may be between nations, but the impact is always local. This is why dialogue matters. This is why negotiation is not weakness, it's wisdom, because when countries refuse to talk, they're not just walking away from each other, they're turning their backs on the people who depend on them to lead with care. It's easy to protect national interest with a firm voice. It's harder to protect the everyday citizen with a soft heart, but that's what leadership should look like, the kind that sees beyond borders and headlines and political gain, and remembers the lives caught in between. Because behind every policy is a person, behind every economic move is a mother, a father, a student, a worker, waiting, hoping, praying that those in power will choose compassion over confrontation. We can't afford to ignore the ripple effects, because even the quietest ripples reach the shore eventually. So the next time leaders decide to shut the door on conversation, may they remember who's standing on the other side of that door. Not just another government, not just another negotiator, but millions of people who will carry the weight of their silence. Global tension is not just a political issue, it's a human one. And until we start treating it that way, the ones who suffer the most will always be the ones with the least to do with the conflict. It doesn't have to be this way, because peace begins with listening. And healing begins when we remember that behind every deal is a life. What the world needs now isn't more noise, more opinions, or more people trying to prove they're right. What the world needs now is heart, because we've become so quick to speak and so slow to listen, so eager to defend and so hesitant to understand. We fight over policies, over pride, over positions, and in the process we forget the people. The real lives in the middle of all this. We think power is about how much you can control, how firm you can stand, how loud you can argue. But maybe power isn't about pushing through. Maybe real power is about knowing when to pause. When to step back, when to open your hand instead of making a fist. What the world needs now is not another statement, not another debate, but someone, anyone, who's willing to say, let's fix this, not because I want to win, but because I want us all to heal. In a world divided by politics, pride, and positions of influence, kindness has started to feel like a lost language, and humility, like an outdated virtue. We've been taught that to survive, you must be hard. To lead, you must be untouchable, but the truth is, the strongest leaders are not the ones who speak the loudest, but the ones who carry the most love for the people they serve. Right now, countries are pulling away from each other. Conversations are ending before they even begin, and walls, both literal and invisible, are rising faster than bridges can be built. We're choosing isolation over invitation, self-interest over shared progress. And all the while, people are left behind, ordinary, hardworking, hopeful people, wondering if anyone is still thinking about them at all. What the world needs now is for us to remember that behind every nation, behind every policy, behind every tense negotiation, there are human beings with dreams, families, fears, and needs. The worker who wants security, the child who wants peace, the mother who wants a future that's safe for her family, the student who wants to believe in something bigger than conflict. We forget that we all want the same things: stability, dignity, opportunity, but somewhere along the way, we started believing that these things are limited, that for one country to succeed, another must fall, that for one voice to be heard, another must be silenced. But it doesn't have to be this way. What the world needs now is leaders who don't just protect power, but protect people, leaders who aren't afraid to say, let's sit down, let's talk again, let's find another way, and not for headlines, not for applause, but for the good of everyone who's quietly counting on them to do what's right. It's easy to walk away, to say, we're done talking. It takes real strength to stay, to say, I still believe we can work through this. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. That's maturity, that's love in action, because what the world needs now is more than solutions. It needs sincerity, more than deals. It needs decency, more than progress. It needs purpose, and all of that begins when we stop shouting and start listening. When we stop thinking only of what we're owed and begin remembering what we owe each other: respect, empathy, grace. These are not soft words. These are strong foundations. And if we could build our conversations, our countries, our communities on these, maybe the world wouldn't feel so heavy. Maybe we'd see less division and more understanding, less pride and more peace, because at the end of the day, all the victories in the world won't matter if we lose what makes us human: the ability to care, to connect, to choose unity over being right. What the world needs now is less ego and more compassion, fewer ultimatums and more open doors, less fear and more faith in one another. It's not too late. We haven't gone too far. A different future is still possible, but someone has to go first. Someone has to say, let's stop the shouting, let's bring back the heart. And maybe if one voice starts, others will follow, because what the world needs now is exactly that: someone willing to start. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's found in the quiet choice to understand. India, a country with history, with voice, with pride. And the U.S., a nation known for leadership, not silence. But in this moment, leadership is not about who says no. It's about who says, let's talk. Because when the powerful stop talking, the powerless start suffering. And in the end, no trade deal, no tariff, no tension is worth more than peace. Let's hope the silence breaks. Let's pray the world listens. And let's remember sometimes the hardest thing to say is exactly what needs to be heard, because true power chooses conversation over confrontation.